Hey y'all, it's Brandon Adams, the host of DawgNation Daily, the daily podcast for Georgia Bulldogs fans, presented by Marco's Pizza, and I'm over the moon excited, as I'm sure you are, about the fact that this Saturday we got Georgia football in Athens. Can't wait to talk to you about it all day long today. Chip Towers coming up. He'll preview the Kirby Smart press conference, which will happen later on this afternoon, and the big week of practice for Georgia as the final preparations are made for Austin Peay on Saturday. So glad you're with us. DawgNation Daily, presented by Marco's Pizza, begins right now.
From DawgNation.com, this is DawgNation Daily, the daily podcast for Georgia Bulldogs fans, presented by Marco's Pizza. Here's your host, Brandon Adams.
You know, it is really amazing. You can feel in the air, right? We all love college football. We've all been counting down those days and weeks for months and months now, getting ready for the start of the 2018 season. And when you wake up on this Monday morning, you can really feel the difference. I don't know if it's the vibe you get from other people. I don't know if it's just the sort of inner feeling you have yourself, but we can all sort of tell that this week is not unlike, or not like every other week, that we really do have college football coming up on Saturday, in particular Georgia and Athens against Austin Peay. Not the opponent you necessarily want to play necessarily, but nonetheless, we are super excited about the start of the 2018 season here on DawgNation Daily, presented by Marco's Pizza, and cannot wait to talk to you about it every day between now and what we believe could be a national championship game for Georgia coming up in January. So with all of that out of the way, let me start today's show this way. I have a wife and two young kids, and it is really amazing. I'm a pretty active father. I've cooked food for my kids. I've changed plenty of diapers. I've taken them to school. I've sort of done everything that a good parent does. You know, I'm not one of these sort of, like hands-off absentee dads. But when it's me and my two kids, the way that my kids treat me is just very, very different than they act when my wife, their mother, is in the home. They're just more comfortable. They're just more confident. They may assume that I'm going to get the job done, but they know she'll get the job done. And I think about that in reference to Georgia football, because if you want to look back on the 2017 Georgia defense, a defense that was good enough to put Georgia in the college football playoff, there was a player on that defense in 2017 that I think had the same effect on the other 10 players in the field that my wife has on my kids. My kids are just more comfortable and confident. They know there's a trusted caretaker watching over the entire process when she's around. And I think the Georgia defense in 2017 felt that way about Roquan Smith. There were 10 guys in the field capable of getting the job done, but there was one guy on the field who you knew could get the job done, and in fact, you knew he wouldn't let anything fall between the cracks. Now, the reason why I'm starting with 2017 here, as we get ready to kick off the 2018 season, is because apparently the Georgia offense may have one of those guys here this season. On Friday, Georgia wide receiver Tyler Simmons, who I still believe was on sides in the national championship game, Tyler Simmons met with the media. In the midst of sort of talking about his own role in that national championship game and talking about everything involved with the UGA offense, he gave a really cool compliment to Georgia quarterback Jake Fromm. Apparently, when Tyler Simmons looks at the way that Jake Fromm has grown over the course of his time at Georgia, he really sees a lot of the same characteristics in Fromm that I just described for the 2017 Buckus Award winner, Roquan Smith. And if you're looking for reasons, maybe more reasons, to feel good about the Georgia offense here this season, Tyler Simmons will certainly help get you there. Here is Simmons praising Fromm, his maturity, but also the fact that he's a little bit like Roquan Smith. You'll love this. Take a listen.
You could tell he's maturing. He came in. He might have had some problems with some calls coming in and everything, but you can tell he's more comfortable in the backfield. He's getting everybody else lined up. He's like the Roquan of the offense. That's how I kind of think of it.
I mean, that's a really cool thing to hear, because I think we all know what Roquan was for that Georgia defense a year ago. And you can say, well, middle linebacker and quarterback aren't that similar in terms of positions, and I guess they're probably not. But output and outcome can be similar here. And Jake Fromm can have the same sort of calming, controlling impact on the Georgia offense that Smith had a year ago. And that's one of those things that maybe we will be able to see on Saturday. My guess is we'll see a lot of Jake Fromm, obviously. And one of the things I'm going to be judging here is the pace with which the Georgia offense plays. No disrespect to Jacob Eason a year ago, but do you remember when Fromm came in the game against Appalachian State, and it's almost like you just sort of kicked that offense into a better gear, a higher gear, and all of a sudden just the rhythm, the pace, the entertainment value of the game just seemed to greatly increase with Fromm there. That was him as a true freshman playing in his first college game. Now we're a year ahead of that in a sophomore situation after Fromm's played a lot of big-time football and had a lot of intense practices here. Watch for that pace on Saturday. Watch for the rhythm of the Georgia offense. I think it'll look commensurate with the quarterback who's in his sophomore season here. I think you'll see kind of a nice rhythm to everything that Georgia does offensively. Now, that's the one thing I think I can say with confidence, but when you look at this Georgia quarterback situation, apart from that, there is still plenty I don't know, including how much Jake Fromm's going to play at the expense of, say, Justin Fields, the backup who makes his debut on Saturday. He'll at least play some, but will he play as much as some Georgia fans want him to? The fact of the matter is, I still don't know the answer to that. As I'm doing this on Monday morning, Kirby Smart's going to speak later on this afternoon for his weekly press conference. My guess is that Smart doesn't shed a whole lot of light on all of this here today. We may go into Saturday still with a bit of a mystery of how Fromm and Fields will be used. The one thing, though, that Kirby Smart did talk about last week, maybe at odds with what some people have assumed about these two quarterbacks, is that they'll use Jake Fromm when it's an obvious passing play and Justin Fields when it may be an opportunity for a running play. That seems to be the sort of caricature that people have drawn of Fromm being very different from Justin Fields, but Kirby Smart was pretty introspective on this in the middle of last week, saying that the way that the fans and many in the media may look at Jake Fromm and Justin Fields, that's not necessarily the way that he looks at him. So if you're trying to figure out how these two quarterbacks will be used on Saturday, maybe Kirby Smart here gives you a little bit of a help towards that cause, although it's also possible that maybe this just muddies the waters even further. Here's Kirby on Fromm and Fields not being all that different.
I don't know that has any effect on it. I really don't. 'Cause I don't see those two as that different. I mean, I think you guys see Jake and Justin a lot different than maybe we do. I mean, we run the same offense with both those guys right now, so it's not like they're seeing that now. Can Justin take off running better? Can he run some gun run stuff? Yeah, he certainly can. But I don't think our two defenses are seeing something different, really. We scramble. We practice scrambles. So Jake Fromm scrambles in practice, and so does Justin, because a lot of your plays end up being scrambles. So, no, I don't think there's a lot of difference in what our defense sees from those two.
So whether intentional or not, that seems to be a bit of a pushback against the special package narrative that there'll be some sort of, whether it's red zone, goal line, third and short, whatever scenario you want to describe here, some sort of special package of plays for Justin Fields. That particular line from Kirby Smart there seems to sort of push back against that notion a bit. In fact, later on in the same press conference, Smart was asked by a different reporter sort of a drill down on that point. You know, will you plan on using both these quarterbacks? Will you have that special package of plays for Justin Fields? Coach, tell us anything you can about how these two quarterbacks will be used, and Smart, as you might imagine, demurred a bit.
You don't really have a plan going in. Your plan is to say, all right, I want the best guy to play. And if a guy brings something to the table that another guy doesn't, and we feel like it's advantageous for us, whether we have a package or we do something with him, but I won't sit here and tell you there's a plan for anything. Right now our plan is to get both those guys ready to play. How do we get them ready to play? We give them reps. We let them see fastball. We let them see them run plays. They run a lot of the same plays during the day. It's not like, oh, there's this Justin Fields offense and there's this Jake Fromm offense. We're not doing that because that's not fair to Justin. Justin's a good quarterback. So we're letting both those guys grow and develop. And we learned last year that we don't know what the future holds at quarterback. So you have to have guys ready to play.
For what it's worth, I agree with Kirby Smart here, and I agree with this philosophy that's been put in place here for Georgia. I do think it's better for the Dogs to give Justin Fields the same offense Jake Fromm has been given here. It's not a different offense for a slightly different quarterback style in Justin Fields. It's use his athleticism within the framework of the traditional Georgia offense, and that's how you get the most out of both quarterbacks. So for what it's worth there, I very much agree with Kirby Smart. And I guess my overarching point of this entire discussion is, when it comes to Georgia winning a national championship in 2018, something that's a very realistic possibility, there are probably a lot of issues more central to that storyline than Jake Fromm or Justin Fields. That's not the most important question facing Georgia in terms of its ultimate postseason destination. But when you look ahead to week one against an opponent we expect to be overmatched, this is certainly the most interesting and entertaining subplot for this week's game. There are big questions to be asked about some other personnel spots for Georgia, but ultimately we may not know that until we see Georgia play an opponent of more consequence. But on Saturday, in kind of a glorified scrimmage, a little bit of Fromm and a little bit of Fields should be a lot of fun for fans to watch. My name is Brandon Adams, the DawgNation Daily, the daily podcast for Georgia Bulldogs fans. We are presented by Marco's Pizza, and we are glad you're here. No matter how you get to us today, live on video on the DawgNation Facebook, DawgNation YouTube page, DawgNation Twitter feed there at 10 a.m., on the radio at noon, on Athens Sports Radio 960 The Ref, and in podcast form, wherever podcasts can be found. The Apple Podcast Player, the Google Podcast Player there for the Android devices, SoundCloud, the world-famous DawgNation.com. Thank you so much for being with us here today on a DawgNation Daily presented by Marco's Pizza. And thanks for Marco's Pizza making it all possible. I know many of you can settle in to maybe watch a little football on Saturday. There were a couple of games on. You're thinking about some of the Thursday night stuff coming up this week. When you get settled in front of your TV to get ready to watch pizza, I bet you watch football and eat pizza. That's a lot better than the alternative, I think. Although I think some of us are excited enough about the sport, we would eat it. But nonetheless, Marco's got something even better for you to eat. It's authentic Italian quality pizza, and right now you can get a great offer, great deal, 2 medium, 2 topping pizzas for $6.99 each. It's every store, every day, the Italian way. You can check them out there at marcos.com. It was kind of funny. Some folks came up to us at Kroger this week, and they were talking about Marco's Pizza, and my kids were there, and they were like, oh, so this is the boy that likes the cheese pizza. And I said, yes, this is the boy that likes the cheese pizza. Daddy likes a little bit more on his pizza than that, but my son likes the cheese pizza, and so people were able to kind of put some faces with names here in terms of my family's Marco's Pizza preferences, but obviously it's great to have Marco's Pizza as part of DawgNation Daily. And speaking of Kroger, one more thing to mention about them. Make sure you check out Before the Hedges, presented by Kroger here this Wednesday. I'm going to talk more about the big announcement we made at Kroger on Thursday night, which is the DawgNation invasion to Baton Rouge coming up in October, and the fact that Kroger is giving away a trip for 2 to the big DawgNation invasion. You can be a part of us with the action as we leave New Orleans, head over to Baton Rouge for the game there that particular Saturday. Be a part of the tailgate beforehand. It's going to be an awesome event. Kroger's giving away a trip for 2 there to a lucky DawgNation Daily listener, viewer, reader, what have you. Kroger presenting that. We're going to talk more about that on Before the Hedges this week, so please make sure you check that out. Really excited about being in Baton Rouge in October as a part of our DawgNation invasion, and really appreciate Kroger making it all possible with their giveaway here. You can also go to DawgNation.com and find out more on that as well. All right, another big thing to sort of talk about for Saturday's game against Austin Peay here for a moment. It's a storyline we've kind of followed a bit during the offseason, or at least during the August portion of the offseason with some of these summer practices. The fact that we have not seen a lot from Terry Godwin. Now, obviously, Georgia fans have great memories of Godwin coming up with what was one of the big touchdowns in the victory against Notre Dame last September. Have not seen a lot of him so far this summer, dealing with a bit of a knee injury. Kirby Smart called it a minor knee injury, and apparently it's minor enough that by sort of the end of last week, apparently he'd sort of shaken most of that off and would at least appearingly seem to be heading towards maybe a full go here for Saturday. That's at least what my hope is. And Kirby Smart did, when he spoke to the media last week, kind of gave a bit of a hopeful tone about Godwin's injury recovery here. I think this is good news for the Georgia offense. I think it's good news for Georgia in particular. Here's Kirby sort of describing how Godwin's on his way back to full health here. Take a listen to the coach.
He's been out there. I don't know if you guys noticed. He's practiced. I think he hit maybe 3,500 yards yesterday, which is the most he's hit all camp. And he got a little fatigued because he's not in practice shape. And then he wasn't injured. It's not in practice shape. So he got about 3,500. I don't know what he got today, but I thought he really pushed through hard today. He was gassed at the end of practice.
So when Kirby's spouting off these numbers, and it seems like he's done that a lot this summer, those are like the GPS numbers. They wear those GPS monitors on their jerseys. You can sort of strike this up as a kind of another sort of technological, scientific advance I know nothing about. I really don't know what most of those like RPM numbers and speed numbers and things like that mean, but Kirby's apparently very, very in tune to them because he mentions that a lot, and that's what he's talking about there with Godwin, those GPS readouts coming off his work there in practice. I take it as good news, though, that the numbers are as high as they are, and you can tell by the sound of Kirby Smart's voice that he's excited about where Terry Godwin is on his recovery here after dealing with a little bit of a knee injury thus far this summer. In fact, Smart went into more detail about exactly what Godwin provides the Georgia offense. Now, earlier we heard from Tyler Simmons talking about the confidence that Fromm gives the rest of the Georgia offense. And as Kirby says, it's Terry Godwin who can also fuel confidence for the Georgia quarterbacks. They feel better about their job knowing they've got a veteran wide receiver to lean on. It's another reason why, if Godwin is indeed on his way back to health, that's good news for Georgia. Here's more from Kirby.
You can't put a measurement on the value of confidence he brings in the room, and the quarterbacks, they feel really confident. They know Terry's going to run the right route. They trust Terry's going to be at the right depth. Terry's one of our best fade throw guys. He's really good at that. We've been missing some back shoulders. Terry's good at that. I mean, there's a lot of things Terry's really good at, and it gives us some confidence out there to go play.
So listen, I think that my mind, if I'm guessing here, is pretty close to where many of yours is when you hear that line from Kirby Smart. He says he's one of our best fade guys. We've been dropping some back shoulder throws. And I think that for those of us who remember last year so fondly, the first thing that comes to mind is, oh, it was Javon Wims who was catching those balls last year. And Georgia's got to replace the 720 yards and 7 touchdowns that Wims had a season ago. And when Kirby Smart says we've been dropping some of those back shoulder throws in practice, some of those fade routes haven't been going quite the way they need to go, I think it does remind us of Javon Wims, who, by the way, had another great catch for the Chicago Bears. I would say as a 7th-round pick right now, it looks like Javon Wims may make that team there in Chicago. He is just absolutely lighting the world on fire during the preseason, which is great for Wims. but it's also a reminder of the fact that Georgia needs a guy like that here this season. It's kind of cool to hear Kirby Smart say Terry Godwin may be indeed that guy. And this may be a bit of a reach, but in honor of that, we're going to make the training staff that's helped get Godwin back to full health our R.S. Andrews Cool Under Pressure Performer of the Week. Because Georgia needs Godwin, the training staff seems to have gotten him ready to go, and we appreciate R.S. Andrews being a part of the show each and every week here on DawgNation Daily. And R.S. Andrews reminds you to keep cool no matter how hot it gets this summer or into the fall here with the Keep Cool No Matter What guys. R.S. Andrews, clean, screen, trained, and timely texts are giving old systems new life. You can call them, they'll come, and then you're cool. It is simple as that. And if your old system is cooled its last, well, R.S. Andrews also has you covered there as well with replacement air conditioning systems, custom designed to last with available financing also. So keep your cool. Call the ones DawgNation trusts, R.S. Andrews, online at rsandrews.com. Busy show for us. We'll hear more from Kirby Smart on another big subject impacting Georgia before the start of the 2018 season in just a few minutes. We'll also preview the other big games around the SEC here this weekend. But for now, though, let's head to Athens. Let's get a preview of what Kirby may talk about later on today and the game against Austin Peay on Saturday. Let's talk to our buddy Chip Towers. Great to have you with us here on DawgNation Daily, presented by Marco's Pizza.
From Athens and across the SEC or wherever the recruiting trail may lead, here's a DawgNation.com insider.
Let me say hello to DawgNation's Chip Towers. Always great stuff at DawgNation.com from Chip, and he's seen a lot of these season kickoffs. We'll see another one on Saturday against Austin Peay. And Chip, first of all, let me say good morning. Thank you for your time. Appreciate you being on the program here today. How you doing?
Man, I'm doing fantastic. It's game week,
yeah.
Brandon, and we finally get to say that. And I don't care. How long you've been doing this, you referred to that. It's been a long time for me, a lot of season openers. But there is just, a tingle in the air and excitement that can't really be, explained to somebody who's not really into college football. It doesn't matter if it's Austin Peay or, Notre Dame. Everybody's fired up and ready to see all these questions that we've bannered about ever since, the morning of January 9th, we get to see a lot of those get answered to some degree in the next few weeks, and that's exciting.
Well, speaking of that, I know we have talked a lot about Jake Fromm and Justin Fields, and later on today, you'll hear Kirby Smart sort of address the media for his weekly press conference, the first year of the 2018 season. And if I had to predict, Chip, my prediction is Kirby will say less today about these two quarterbacks than he has said at any point in time during the offseason, certainly over the last couple of weeks. My guess is he's just going to be, somewhat buttoned up on this. So we may be left to sort of extrapolate this a bit on our own. So with all that in mind, do you have a picture in your mind of what do you think that Fromm and Fields, the playing time relationship between the two, the way the two guys will be used, do you have a working picture in your mind of what this may appear to look like on Saturday?
Yeah, I have a picture in my mind now, and I'm eager to ask Kirby. I'm like you, Brent. I don't really expect him to, open his book and just say, okay, here's our plan. Here's how we plan to go into it in the first game or the second game or the first month. It's just not his style, and that's okay. But yeah, based on everything I've seen and heard, I still think it's Jake Fromm's offense. I still think it's Jake Fromm's job. But I think they've been extremely impressed with Justin Fields throughout the entire preseason camp, probably to a greater degree even than anybody's letting on. And so that there'll be a plan to get him in the game. I would assume we'll see Justin Fields in the first half against Austin Peay, and that's regardless of how it's going. Now, whether that's the third series or the fourth series or once a quarter is very common in these type of situations. Like, all right, let's give him a rep. Let's give him a series here, maybe the third or fourth series, and then go back to Fromm. That's what I expect. I don't know if that's what we'll get or not, but I feel pretty confident that we'll see Justin Fields and we'll see him relatively early in the season opener.
And let me follow up on that for a minute, because when Kirby spoke about these two guys on Wednesday, and I actually played some of this audio before you joined us here today, he talked about, not seeing, this is Kirby saying, not seeing a lot of differences between Fromm and Fields, and that they're running the same offense, and it's not like some special package. He didn't use that phrase in particular, but that's the way I'm going to paraphrase it, for Justin Fields. If that is indeed true, Chip, I take that as good news. I like the idea of a guy like Fields, when he does play, working within the framework of the existing Georgia offense and just simply using his athleticism, and he is a better runner than Fromm, just using that as sort of an extra wrinkle. I'm sort of glad to hear they're not sort of reinventing the wheel just when Fields comes in the game, because frankly I think that would be counterintuitive and counterproductive, to be honest with you.
Yeah, exactly. And everybody, the opponent would know it too when he comes out there. I mean, you can build off of that and everything, but really going all the way back to our conversations with Jim Chaney at the opening of preseason camp, he's like, look, yeah, Justin Fields is a great runner. There's no question. I mean, he looks like a tailback when he tucks that thing under his arm, and heck, he's bigger than a lot of the linebackers out there, so he can do something with it. But, you only have 2 quarterbacks, so it's not like you can line up and say, okay, now we got some quarterback run, and let's go in here and say it's big and athletic and everything else Justin Fields is. You don't want to subject yourself to any more contact than is necessary at the quarterback position. And that's right. I mean, he can line up in that shotgun and do everything that Jake Fromm's doing. The difference is that when he gets pressure, he can really make them pay for coming after him. And the same thing when Georgia runs that little zone read that Jake Fromm now has had some success keeping from now and then, but certainly Justin Fields can probably do a lot more with that. But, it's going to be a while before we get to see, a lot of that from Justin Fields, I think. And there's just no substitute for experience. And right now, that's the only thing that kid lacks is experience. So Georgia can try to get him that, get him a little experience and get him comfortable, because Jake Fromm, that's what he has a lot of now, and you just can't make that up.
I've asked you about Terry Gavin a lot during the summer months here, or especially during the August practices. Kirby talking about his minor knee injury, and I said, at what point in time does this become something that Georgia fans should worry about? Apparently, the answer to that question may be never, because based on Smart's sort of assessment of this situation, it sounds like Godwin's on his way back here. I'm guessing he's probably going to play here on Saturday here. Kirby also talked about what Terry Gavin means to this Georgia offense, and with Georgia looking to replace Javon Wims provided a year ago, that assessment of Godwin here, both in terms of his return to health and his ability to kind of be that fade back shoulder guy the way that Wims was so much for Georgia a year ago, that's all good news for Georgia fans, right?
Yeah, it really is. And Terry, the whole thing has gotten, is kind of quiet really, but, I think and I know, that guy's the leader of the receivers. I mean, there's no question about it, both in actions and in talk. He's even while he's been on the sideline a lot in this camp, excuse me, he has been right there on the sideline, talking those guys up, giving Demetrius Robertson a lot of personal attention, giving them pointers on this route or that route and everything else. At the end of the day, though, Georgia needs number 5 on the field, and he'll be out there. Now, how much they try to go use him against Austin Peay, I don't know. They may trot him out there to start just because, he's a deserving, senior leader. And they, hey, look, these guys, they keep up with that, how many starts they have and all that stuff. But I don't think you would see a heavy dose of Terry Gavin in this game, because not only is Austin Peay the type of opponent, an FCS opponent that you're going to handle pretty easily, but man, Georgia they have a ton of players at that position. And the fact is, I'm sure they're still trying to work out exactly what is our rotation going to be, because they only take 70, to the South Carolina game as per SEC rules. And, they tend to, generally, Georgia doesn't carry more than 8 receivers, on a road game, because they have to be able to contribute in other ways on special teams or whatever. Georgia's got 18 receivers, 14 of them on scholarship, I think, something like that. And so that's a very, very difficult situation. So I think what you're going to see in this first game is Georgia just a heavy, heavy rotation of different receivers, and kind of give these guys a chance. Show us what you got, because, it may determine whether you're on that bus heading to Columbia or not.
Before we let you go, I want to drill down on a couple specific topics based on things you've written at DawgNation.com. Before we get to that, though, let me kind of do kind of an overarching general question here. I just hit with you a couple of these storylines. Obviously, I think the most entertaining subplot for Saturday is what happens between Jake Fromm and Justin Fields. What else is on your mind about the game, though, Chip? I mean, when you look at those, other storylines, I'm going to talk about the secondary before we're done the show today. I think that's still something yet to be decided. There's, I guess, that open issue at the left guard spot maybe as well. What's kind of on your mind sort of as other lingering issues here and what we'll see on Saturday? It may be a glorified scrimmage, but there's at least still some info we can kind of notice. What are you paying attention to?
Well, this is what's always exciting about this time of year for me. Is getting these questions answered, and I'm eager to see kind of what the rotation is at tailback. I don't even know if you can really call it tailback anymore. Running back. I'm eager to see whether Elijah Holyfield or DeAndre Swift starts. It doesn't matter, but Elijah Holyfield has had a great camp now. And DeAndre Swift is what he is. You'll read about him at Georgia's own credit union season preview that you and I have done together, and he's a terrific player, no question. But just kind of the rotation, how are those guys going to fit together now that you got four with Zamir White out of the situation? Inside linebacker is incredibly intriguing to me because it's just been a real mystery the way Georgia's been deploying them. Now as Kirby likes it, we hadn't seen a ton of practice, but at times we see Tay Crowder and Natrez Patrick in there, two big, huge guys at inside linebacker with the number one defense. But other times we see, Monty Rice and Juwan Taylor, and then sometimes we see a mixture therein. What is going to be Georgia's primary inside linebacker package? They may not know that at this point. They've mixed and matched a lot, throughout the preseason. That may be just because they're trying to figure out the right combination. Georgia's O-line, I think it's going to line up like we think, but the intrigue there is just there's so much talent, and who might emerge. And then you're going to ask me about the secondary, and that probably is the biggest between linebacker and the secondary. Who's going to be your five back there? I promise you, we'll be feverishly, scribbling that down, from the first defensive snap for Georgia on Saturday, because you just can't be sure all the different combinations that we've seen in the preseason of what this is actually going to look like in the first game.
Yeah, that's going to be really, really fun to see. I also like the column that you wrote at DawgNation recently about, Georgia and Oregon are going to play in, I guess it's the 2023 Chick-fil-A kickoff. That's a pretty good game, neutral site spot there. Atlanta, I think Georgia has to play defense against teams like Alabama and Clemson, kind of coming into the city and getting a little bit of a commercial for the program. That's that's part of that. But I sort of agree with the premise of a column you wrote recently of it's more fun now to play that game in Sanford Stadium than it is in Mercedes-Benz Stadium. Even though Mercedes-Benz is a beautiful venue and Chick-fil-A kickoff's kind of a cool, relatively new tradition around college football, it's just sort of more fun to play that in Athens. Next year, Notre Dame's coming to Athens. That's just a blast. That's like the kind of thing I'm sort of already a little bit excited about. It's still more than a year away. I just, Chip, think we're in a new world here where that's the direction all this kind of stuff is trending here in terms of, what are you doing for me in terms of my home stadium, and what kind of cool road trips are you giving me a chance to take to iconic venues like, what Notre Dame was a year ago and what Austin or, Clemson, somewhere like that might be in the future. That's the direction all this is heading, is it not?
It is. I mean, I get it that the end game is trying to win all your games and get in the playoff. But, I'm a believer, especially in this day and age, that this is entertainment, and you need to give your loyal fans, everything you possibly can for their entertainment dollar. In particular, these season ticket holders that, really lay down more and more money every year for the right to come to Sanford Stadium and watch those games. And look, I get it, but, they're not coming there so that they can see Austin Peay in Middle Tennessee and UMass, and I realize that the complications in scheduling and everything else, but when you do have the opportunity to play somebody like Oregon, I think those games need to be on campus, and I think you need to go on the other team's campus. If the DawgNation has shown us anything else, last year, with the Notre Dame invasion, and everywhere that Georgia went in the postseason, Georgia fans are hungry for this, and they will follow you. You schedule it, they will come. And I would just like to see Georgia just be a little bit, throw caution to the wind a little bit. I think if you're a good team, you're a good team. You don't have to throw a UMass and a Middle Tennessee State and an Austin Peay in there to make sure that you get to the end of the season unscathed. The way we are a playoff system now. So, schedule those big out-of-conference Power Five, early in the season, and if you're worthy of playing in the playoff, you'll still get there.
I think that's very well said, Chip. Let me finish with this. You also had some interesting quotes of the day from an orthopedist on the nature of the injury suffered by Zamir White 2 Saturdays ago, and I thought it was really good reporting. I guess what the surgeon ultimately says here is kind of what I was sort of thinking. That obviously I don't have any medical expertise, but essentially that being on punt coverage is not sort of more likely to produce an injury, and that it was really just sort of an interesting look at the entire process all the way around. What did you kind of take from the conversation you had there in terms of what the surgeon says here about what happened to Zamir White and sort of separating fact from fiction with all of that?
Well, yeah, and, but I felt like, after, I wrote a Tyler Stake about it, and I was a little bit critical from the standpoint of, this guy's just 8 months removed from surgery. Should he have been out there, with a brace on his other leg? And I was in particular, I was worrying about, so if you have a brace on your right leg, does that make you, give you a propensity to, kind of favor your left leg, and maybe, and these, I think these are legitimate questions. And so that's what, at the end of the day, Brandon, that's what we are. That's what
Sure.
we do. We're reporters, and we ask questions. We ask the hard questions. So sometimes people don't like the questions we ask, but we got to ask them anyway. And the more I thought about it, I said, well, I need to find out from somebody about it. And it was a little bit of a revelation to me on a number of levels. One, that there's no real medical data to support that braces in and of themselves protect you.
Yeah, that was
from
fascinating.
having another knee injury.
That was fascinating.
Wasn't that
Yeah.
interesting? Yeah, absolutely not. Having one on the right doesn't mean that you're more likely to injure your left one, and that running is running, and you're cleared as you're cleared, and it really doesn't make any difference. And then I think we all could probably agree, because we've seen this in a number of different sports, a number of different athletes, but some of them just have an anatomy that is more likely to result in this type of injury for whatever reason. So I thought it was only fair, after just kind of espousing my opinion, to check with an expert and see what the experts say. That's what we're always going to do. And I was surprised by the results, and I shared that there. So at the end of the day, Zamir White was probably going to injure that left knee, whether it was carrying toss sweeps or running down on punt coverage. And the disappointment is for all of us. We wanted to see what all the fuss was about. You're always eager to find out if whatever you saw in high school translates on the college level, and between the injury he had before and the one he has now. Doggone it, we're just going to have to wait a little longer. But I think at the end of the day, Georgia's going to be all right, because they have other tailbacks. And I think Zamir White's going to be fine. He'll end up with a red shirt, and, hey, we'll see him next year.
All right, Chip, great stuff. Kirby coming up later on today with his press conference. I know you'll be all over that for DawgNation.com. We'll read a bunch from you here this week, and get ready for Athens on Saturday for Austin Peay. Thanks for your time, and we'll look forward to speaking to you soon.
See you soon.
Good stuff there from Kirby Smart.
Let's take a look around the rest of the league. This is SEC Through.
I've apparently got Kirby Smart on the brain. You may have heard me say good stuff there from Kirby Smart. I meant to say good stuff there from Chip Towers. I was thinking about Kirby, just because that's who we talk about half the time here on the program. Really kind of fascinating stuff, though, on the Zamir White thing. Really interesting reporting on that. And ultimately, as I've said a million times, I'm super disappointed about not seeing Zamir on Saturday. But for me, it comes down to this. On every single play, I want the 11 best players on every single play. And for me, tackling a punt returner is just as important as a running back scoring a touchdown. Every yard counts. Every bit of field position matters. And it's elite players that get you great play on the field. Kirby explained that statistically last week, and I think that's important to keep in mind. Even if it's not Zamir here on the field for this season, for the guys who are healthy and able to play, I think Georgia fans ought to want the Georgia coaches to use the best players at their disposal for every opportunity, special teams included there. We'll have more from Kirby Smart coming up here in just a moment on another one of those kind of unsettled issues as Georgia gets ready to start the 2018 season on Saturday. Let me, though, for our SEC Through, talk about this just for a moment. So recently, Jay-Z and Beyonce, which may be the first time we've name-checked Jay-Z and Beyonce here on a Dog Nation Daily. They did a show, one of those sort of like super ticket shows, husband and wife, at Williams-Brice Stadium. Now, a lot of these teams have kind of gotten into this recently, or, cities have kind of gotten into this recently where they say, hey, this stadium sits empty for a whole, year. How about we start having some big major concerts there? We can make some more money. I don't fault the I don't even know who owns Williams-Brice Stadium. If it's the university, it's the state, City of Columbia, whomever. I don't fault them for wanting to make more money, though. But what we find out is, and these pictures have been all over social media as of late, which is that South Carolina, on the heels of the Jay-Z Beyonce show, had to replace all the turf. And they were literally, I guess this is the way the turf is sort of put down. You see the picture there on your screen from Charles Bloom, who covers the Gamecocks. They are literally like rolling this out like carpet, and eventually it's sort of all going to sort of grow together. You see, if you're watching on video, the sprinkler system kind of taking care of all of this, essentially replacing all of the turf there at Williams-Brice Stadium, which means that is it horticulturalist? Is that someone who's an expert on grass? I'm no horticulturalist, but it seems like there could be a little bit of gap between the turf between now and September 8th when Georgia plays there. I think this is a sensitive issue for many Georgia fans going back to that Tennessee game in 2015. Now, I can't speak about the Nick Chubb injury that day if it was really caused by a faulty turf there at Tennessee, but there are no shortage of Georgia fans on social media who believe that's true. And to think that, South Carolina trying to make money off a Jay-Z Beyonce show might, not be taking as good a care of the grass there in that stadium as they could. Listen, that's going to make some Georgia fans nervous, although I'll admit that I have very little credibility when it comes to how grass grows and how turf is laid down and everything else. But the pictures just look pretty weird to me. We'll let you weigh in the comment section if you'd like. Also getting excited about the upcoming Saturday's worth of games for other SEC opponents. Sort of made my peace with the fact that Georgia's not really participating in that this year. Georgia Austin Peay will get very little coverage on ESPN, very little national attention. This is not going to South Bend a year ago, which was one of the hallmark days of the entire season, and really from any standpoint. Georgia's not going to get noticed a bunch this week. There are some SEC games we're talking about. I think that Auburn-Washington is fascinating. I think that one of the weird sort of curious subplots is the fact that Auburn's going to now play 3 games in a row there at Mercedes-Benz Stadium. That's a little bit weird. But the other thing about this game that I think is really worth mentioning here, if Auburn loses this game, Malzahn, who just recently signed his contract extension, I think you're going to see some very restless, nervous Auburn fans. They know they have a very difficult schedule coming up. They realize all of that as a major problem. And I think that, for Auburn fans, the Auburn program, they sort of treat their coach, or they're sort of treated as one of these programs that's happy with its coach. Boy, let this game go south against Washington. Washington coming from the Pacific Northwest and beating Auburn in Atlanta. There'll be some very upset Auburn fans. And I don't think that's going to happen. I think Auburn wins the game. But watch what happens if it doesn't work out that way. Tennessee, West Virginia, I also think is fascinating. I think the issue here, frankly, comes down to is Tennessee just going to get blown out by West Virginia? I think it could happen. I don't think the Vols are very good at all. I think Will Greer's trying to start a Heisman campaign. The quarterback for the Mountaineers, a Week 1 national showcase game gives him a chance to do that. Playing against the SEC probably helps there a bit as well. I think that Tennessee is just on high alert here to even try to keep this one close. They're only about a touchdown underdog at the moment, but I think the game actually could get farther away than that. Louisville, Alabama, much the same way. This may be an Alabama blowout. I know Louisville's talked a little trash here. That generally sort of works against the team that tries it against Alabama. See Vanderbilt from a year ago. Is this one of those games that Louisville can keep it close enough to make Alabama uncomfortable and maybe create a little bit more quarterback controversy? That may be the only thing worth watching there. I'll also say one final Week 1 game to kind of get to here. We'll talk a lot about these games here this week. Miami plays LSU. This should be a very good game. And I feel like I'm probably a little contrarian on this. Most of the country is very down on LSU. Over the long haul, I am. Over the long haul, I think Ed Orgeron's got some real problems. The closer we get to the start of the season, the more I think that this LSU team may be a little bit better than some think. Relevant for Georgia because Georgia goes there in October. We'll have our DawgNation invasion for that Saturday. But in terms of the Miami LSU game, watch the way America lines up behind Mark Richt and Miami in this game. I think that LSU wins straight up on the field. That's my prediction there for that. We'll sort of talk more about why throughout the rest of the week here on DawgNation Daily presented by Marco's Pizza. But with that said, let me kind of get back to the other game on Saturday, or the game that Georgia fans are the most interested in. That's Georgia versus Austin Peay. And, as Chip and I were talking about a moment ago, there is still an element of this game that will only give us glimpses of some of the unanswered questions. The real unanswered questions will be satisfied on the road Week 2 against South Carolina in whatever condition the field happens to be in there that day. Those are when the real questions will be answered. But we'll see some glimpses of some issues sort of take shape. And one of those may be in the secondary. Now, I don't know how much Austin Peay is going to throw. I don't know how much time they'll have to throw when they do. But we'll see who's on the field on Saturday. We'll see, who Kirby Smart, based on a hard month of August practices, decides to trust. In fact, Kirby did sort of talk about this recently about, admitting that there's still some sort of unsettled, stuff going on in the secondary, but there's also potentially of names emerging. Here was Kirby from not too long ago kind of foreshadowing the issues with the Georgia defensive secondary.
We're trying to hone in, but I don't know that the question's been answered. I thought today we gave up less vertical passes than we did last time, and we threw it more often. So we made more plays down the field. Can I tell you who the two starters are, or the starter opposite Bake? Probably can't tell you that right now because I don't know. I'll say this: Tyson Campbell played better today than he did last time. Stokes has played well. Marc Webb, now that he's back healthy, has played well. But the star position is probably completely unsettled.
I think it's really interesting that Kirby Smart mentions three names there in particular. Tyson Campbell, who, listen, if Georgia's going to win a national championship this season, you need five-star guys to play like five-star guys. That's one of the reasons why I have big hope for Tyson Campbell. If you're watching on video, you can see I'm wearing the Georgia G on my shirt right now. So I make no secrets about my allegiance here. I want to see Georgia win this national championship, and if it's going to happen, I think Tyson Campbell is a big potential name to sort of contribute to that cause there. But when I'm getting excited about guys like Campbell, or when I was back in the spring excited about Devod Wilson before his injury, or Chris Smith, who we've got to know around DawgNation here, when I get excited about all these freshman defensive backs and how they may contribute to solving some of the issues with the sort of unsettled Georgia secondary, Kirby Smart does remind us, though, that, hey, now listen, this is still a tough position from a cerebral standpoint for a young guy to play, and freshmen are still out there trying to learn. So keep that in mind as well when you think about who's going to really contribute at your cornerback, safety, and star position spots. Here's a little bit more from Kirby on that issue.
They don't have it yet. Freshmen never do. There's just so many adjustments in college football. I mean, you got spread sets, motions, orbits, rockets, bolts. I mean, there's all these things people are doing. So I don't think they know it. But what's important is the guy that's behind them knows it. JR and Richard, you got to coach those young guys up and kind of get them fixed.
Yeah, so I think that's really interesting from Kirby Smart. And, obviously JR and Richard, the two safeties, Georgia will lean on heavily. He doesn't mention DeAndre Baker there, but Baker may be a first-round pick in the upcoming NFL draft. They're going to lean heavily on him, but that still gives you two spots you're trying to figure out. As Kirby said a couple of weeks ago, star is a total unknown right now. Could be a couple different guys depending on, the down and distance situation for the UGA offense. And if we're waiting a little bit for Tyson Campbell to look like, what we thought he could be coming out of high school, I think it only puts more pressure on some of those 2017 signees. I mean, you want to go back to that class. It was a great recruiting breakthrough for Georgia. It was the number 3 class in the country, according to the 24/7 Sports composite. It was probably the best class up to that point Georgia had ever signed in many years. From a just sort of composite numeric standpoint, it would have been good enough to be the nation's number 1 class. It was a big historic moment for the Georgia program. And that class included a lot of defensive backs. Now, thus far, we haven't heard much from many of those guys. Adding to that is one of the names that Kirby Smart also mentioned there a moment ago, Marc Webb, who kind of converted from wide receiver to a defensive back. He's battled injury here a bit. My guess is Webb is a guy they probably feel pretty good about. My guess is Webb's a guy that's going to play. Another guy, though, like Eric Stokes, who Kirby different times had some good things to say. Maybe this is finally the time for some of those guys to step up and emerge. Some of those 2017 signees like Stokes, who quite haven't had their moment yet in a Georgia uniform. That could be one of the things that helps this Georgia secondary be what it needs to be. Eventually, it also probably includes a guy like Tyson Campbell, but in the early going, can a guy like Stokes really live up to the billing that he sort of established for himself after what seemed to be a string of good practices during the month of August? All right, we will get ready to say goodbye to you here today. Also, thanks for being with us here on DawgNation Daily, presented by Marco's Pizza. And around these parts, we like to believe that a good Georgia fan is a Gator hater first and foremost. It's a very important subject to us around here. We believe that Georgia's number 1 rival are those lousy, stinking Gators. And we think that 61 days from right now, Georgia goes back to Jacksonville. We think probably still undefeated, but back to Jacksonville and beats Florida once again. It's our Gator Hater Countdown right here on a DawgNation Daily, presented by Marco's Pizza, and I love doing it every single day. I also am really excited about this, and so many of you lately have asked me, hey, when are y'all guys going to be back at Marlowe's Tavern again? What's going to be happening in Marlowe's Tavern again soon? Well, I'm happy to let you know, and I'm going to talk a lot about this in the days ahead, but next week, September 5th, we're going to be back at the Marlowe's in Dunwoody for a huge event. Terrapin Brewing going to be on hand. They're going to fire up the big green egg out there on the lawn. We're going to celebrate the season at Marlowe's next week. We'll see you there. And for those of you on video, we will talk to you right now. Good amount of time left for comments. I know many of you have got things you want to talk about, so we'll kind of dive in and get a lot of these. And you can kind of take it wherever you want to go, whether it be something we've already hit on today's program or kind of something else that's on your mind related to Georgia football. We'll do a lot of that. It also occurs to me that I did a whole show without mentioning the fact that Georgia added a 2020 prospect on Saturday that I was really excited about getting, Jamil Burroughs. I'm going to get yelled at on social media for that. I am not in any way disregarding Jamil Burroughs. We were very busy today, but I should have mentioned Burroughs. But great news for Georgia to get the 2020 commit from Burroughs. We'll talk to Jeff Sentell a lot about that tomorrow. And y'all weep for my Twitter mentions once people listen to an entire show and realize that Burroughs isn't in there. By the way, you can see him on your screen there, right there, just mauling quarterbacks. First of all, I think that McEachern has one of the nicest high school uniforms in Georgia. I love the way the gold and the white play off each other there with the blue. That's a great looking uniform. And Burroughs, man, he fills it up. And I'm thrilled about having him in a Georgia uniform, and I am going to get roasted for not talking about him today. So y'all just weep for me on that if you don't mind. Jason Bryan Lee asking about Hazelwood decommitting. My answer to that question is no. I do not believe so. I believe that next fall we'll be on this spot. By the way, something else I should have mentioned today. This is the 3-year anniversary of DawgNation Daily. Today, officially, we start year 4 of our program. I'm a senior now, so I'm really excited about this. This is our 3rd-year anniversary of DawgNation Daily today. Good point from Patrick Lindsay here. Does Eddie still have his cast on or off? That's a great point. Let me take the Gator hater sign off here for a moment. I think it is officially time to take the cast off for Eddie. Actually, should we wait on Kirby Smart to officially say this later on today? No, at this point in time, he's practiced enough. Now, I probably can't actually peel this cast off right now. I'm probably going to have to cut this off. But for those of you who may have been away for the summer, this is Eddie. Eddie is our sort of unofficial mascot. He holds his Gator hater sign on the show each and every day. The reason why we have Eddie is because Dan Mullen, who some would say looks like Cousin Eddie from the Christmas Vacation movie from National Lampoons, talked about Georgia's SEC championship a year ago, that even a blind squirrel can find a nut from time to time. So Eddie is our blind squirrel in honor of a pretty dumb thing that Dan Mullen had to say. But when Jake Fromm broke his hand, Eddie wanted to, in solidarity with Fromm, also wear a cast on his. Eddie's a lefty, so this is also his non-throwing hand. And so we said we're going to take the cast off when Fromm was good to go. I do believe that Fromm is good to go. So after the show today, I will cut his cast off there, and we'll be all ready to go with that. Thanks for the reminder on that regard. Jeff Hensley with congratulations for the 3-year anniversary. Really appreciate that. Thanks so much. Matt Rukavina says that in the comment section, y'all were talking about Desmond Howard picking South Kakalaki over Georgia in the East this past weekend. Talk about bulletin board material. Yeah, listen, I am very clear about this. I do not believe that there is a bias against Georgia, but here's what I do believe with all of my heart. There is a desperate attempt at wishful thinking to hope that this season will be something other than boring. You know, we go back to 2015 for a moment. Do you remember how boring that season the SEC was? Georgia was like the most mediocre 9-3 I've ever seen in my entire life. I have never seen a 9-3 look less inspiring, less worthy of remembrance than Georgia's 9-3 was in 2015. Alabama was like 100 miles better than every team in the SEC there that season. The league was just boring. You know, Florida, a mediocre Florida team, won a mediocre East, and we knew they had no chance of, you know, competing with Alabama in the SEC championship. It was just a boring time for the league. 2016 may have been that a little bit too, I guess. It's just, you know, kind of a boring time for the league. I think if you're the media and you have spent billions of dollars, and you know, at the very least, you know, 9-figure sum, hundreds of millions here to cover this sport, you desperately hope it's not boring. You desperately hope it's not a boat race. I mean, I watch NASCAR, and you know, when one of these cars gets way out in front of the others, when there's like 8 seconds between the leader and the second place car, there's no reason to watch. And I think that a lot of the college football media feels the same way. We've seen Alabama run roughshod of the SEC West, and on paper it looks like Georgia's going to run roughshod. over the SEC East. If Georgia makes Desmond Howard look like a fool, then ESPN to a certain extent has more problems than Desmond Howard's faulty pick. It's got a lot of games that it has a hard time selling. Honestly, I think for right now, Georgia is going to make the SEC East boring. South Carolina is the biggest threat to Georgia. I think Georgia wins that game by 3 touchdowns. I think that Tennessee and Florida are no threat to Georgia whatsoever. Now, if Muschamp continues to get the occasional recruiting win against Georgia, and he's done a couple of those, Jamias Williams not lighting the world on fire right now, but Georgia wanted him, South Carolina got him. Rick Sandage is a player that Georgia wanted, South Carolina got. It may take a while for Sandage to really make an impact in the South Carolina uniform, but that was a recruiting win for the Gamecocks. DJ Daniel, different folks on the internet have different opinions about that. I believe that Georgia wanted DJ Daniel. I believe that South Carolina got him. So that's 3 examples of players that Georgia wanted that South Carolina got. There may be more. Those are just the 3 that come to mind right now. If enough of those happen in the future, even a small handful here and there, then South Carolina at some point in time could be a legitimate threat to Georgia on the field. Right now, though, that's not the case. I don't think that Georgia's going to play an SEC East game this year within 14 to 17 points. Georgia's toughest games are against Auburn, against LSU, and that's probably going to be true in the future as well. Next couple of years, the SEC West will present the toughest opponents for Georgia. So what I believe that Desmond Howard's doing there is just hoping and praying. And there are a lot of media members that kind of fall into this, even ones that don't work for ESPN, that you just have a vested interest in college football being interesting. I just think that there's a lot of fear that Georgia, who's collected a bunch of recruits, much the same way Alabama, following that very same blueprint, that Alabama and Georgia are going to team up together to make most of the SEC schedule just boring and inconsequential. I think that subconsciously that's probably what Desmond Howard's thinking. Santiago Diarn says, BA, any thoughts on what the backlash would look like if hypothetical Georgia loses to LSU and Auburn and then doesn't make the SEC championship game? He says, I don't think we'll lose the East, but who knows? Yeah, I think in terms of a 2-loss team making the college football playoff, I think there's one SEC team that has a much better chance of doing that than anybody else. Take away the Alabama reputation here for a moment, the fact that Alabama's been in every college football playoff. Put that aside. That's a little bit of an intangible that's sort of hard to measure, which is what I guess intangible means. But if you look at the SEC team that could suffer 2 losses and still be alive, it's most likely to be Auburn, because Auburn plays by far and away the toughest schedule of the SEC. They play Washington. They play, the entire SEC West. They go on the road to Georgia. That's just a really tough schedule. So I think the committee, if I had to guess, is going to be more likely to forgive an Auburn 2-loss schedule than it would be some sort of Alabama or Georgia in the same scenario. Now, the committee's also a little bit unpredictable from time to time, and from year to year, they don't really do much to establish precedent. They sort of treat different years differently. But if I had to guess, that's going to be the case there. It's also going to be interesting to see, are there multiple elite teams around the country that makes it harder to get 2 SEC teams into the playoff this year? Because if at all possible, I think the committee wants to limit the SEC teams in this tournament. I don't think they want 2 SEC teams in the tournament if they can help that. And that's obviously easy to avoid if you have that really top-flight, elite-looking Big Ten champion. And I think you probably will. The Big Ten East, say what you will of Ohio State's sort of off-field problems, that division's still loaded. The winner of that division is likely a very worthy representative playing against probably a Wisconsin team from the West that on paper right now looks very good. So that's probably a very worthy Big Ten champion. My assumption is that Clemson runs roughshod of the ACC. That's a worthy champion. What happens in the Pac-12, though? What happens in the Big 12, though? Do those leagues stumble enough that it seems conceivable to put 2 SEC teams back into the college football playoff? I don't know how much I believe in Oklahoma right now. I don't know how much I believe in probably the most likely Pac-12 representative, Washington. I think that if you look at the committee, the way it's handled things in the past, it's sort of the Pac-12's turn to be in the playoff. We've seen sort of a rotation between the Pac-12 and the Big 12 in terms of who gets into the playoff. It was Oregon year 1, it was Oklahoma, and then we've sort of seen that it was Washington the following year, back to Oklahoma again last year. We've sort of seen a little bit of an alternating bid between the Pac-12 and the Big 12. If that continues, it's sort of the Pac-12's turn here this year. But if neither one of those leagues produce that, Big Ten East, Clemson level, team, then the door could be open to 2 SEC teams again. Let me go over to YouTube for a moment. And of course, we appreciate y'all being with us on the program here today. Let me pop over to YouTube. Yeah, there you go. Crow King 123 says best offense wins the Big 12. West Virginia's the best offense in the Big 12. I think they'll win it. Well, that's a pretty nice opinion. Pretty interesting opinion. I still think Oklahoma's pretty good. You know, they did announce Kyler Murray as their quarterback, which obviously he's going to be the quarterback. He was a former elite recruit, spent a little bit of time at Texas A&M. They can still build around him a bit. You know, just like every other Big 12 team, they're going to have some defensive issues. You know, overall, I'm assuming here, just based on the numbers in recruiting, you should see a little more depth of the roster around Murray there at Oklahoma in comparison to what Will Greer should have around him there at West Virginia. But that's a really interesting opinion. Gregory Glaves also asking about Oklahoma State as well. The truth is, I don't quite know how Oklahoma State factors into all that this year. J.W. Schwartz, boy, a lot of good talk over in the YouTube section about some of this national landscape. J.W. Schwartz says the Puppies won't win the pack. USC's a lot stronger than they're being given credit for. They'll be the one to keep a second SEC team out, NorCal Dogs. So JW checking in from California, talking a little Pac-12 here. And I guess overall, I kind of agree with this point that one of the more dangerous teams in the country may still be USC, even though it seems like, we haven't seen a lot from them since their Rose Bowl win a couple of seasons ago. From a just overall talent standpoint, they are still a dangerous team, and maybe even more dangerous than Washington. I don't agree with I should say I don't necessarily disagree with JW on that. Good point. Brew2L on YouTube says that James Cook's going to be hard to handle this season. Yeah, I know that's one of those freshmen that many Georgia fans are very excited about seeing. Diedrich Frazier says we got to do away with these cupcake games. I would agree with Diedrich on that. As a fan, I'd be willing to tolerate occasionally more losses if it meant consistently better games. I came up in an era in the 80s when all that mattered was going undefeated, that, you could have an 84 BYU or a team like that go undefeated, and they're the national champion because they're undefeated. Hopefully we live in a little bit more of a analytical age where we know that the zero in the loss column, not all those undefeated seasons are created equally necessarily. I just rather everybody play tougher games, and then if your national champion's 9-3, that's fine. I mean, the Major League Baseball World Series champion's going to lose 70-something games probably. I mean, this idea that greatness is proved by the absence of losses, in most sports, that's not the case. We've seen 9-7 teams win the Super Bowl, for instance. So I don't need you to be undefeated to believe you're the best college football team, but I do need you to play good games. So I agree with Diedrich on that. Brad Christian says, I should get Kirby Smart on the show sometime and ask him these tough questions. Yeah, listen, there's always a standing invitation to Coach Smart to be a part of the program here. We'd love to have him. Andricus Lindley says that Kill Crumpton's going to be the breakout special teams player. He'll house a few punts. That's certainly what they brought him in here to do a year ago. Now, as it turns out, the Georgia roster is pretty deep, and even for a specialist like that, it's sort of hard to find that role. But, we did see some of him on the field at the end of last season. There's some whispers of him being, more involved here in some of the closed scrimmages here this summer. So maybe Crumpton getting involved here, wearing a different number, by the way, because he wore 16 during the year last year, right? But he's wearing 25 now. And Demetrius Robertson's wearing 16 now. So maybe you see him. Chad Cahill, by the way, checking in to say, Saturday, I can't wait for football. Can't wait for football. Yeah, it's going to be a lot of fun, Chad. Thanks for checking into the program. Really appreciate that. New level recruiting. By the way, Junior Baker, y'all should follow him on Twitter. He sent out a tweet this week of a great-looking piece of video from Nazir Stackhouse, another one of those 2020 Georgia commits. He says, you got to keep the cupcake games in the schedule. It keeps underprivileged kids coming to Division II and Division III schools. So, Junior, my feelings on that are pretty complicated because, on the one hand, I do love opportunities for all college players. I mean, I love because, listen, nobody loves high school football, more than I do. We were at a game on Friday night, and, I love that, that brand of the sport, and I love seeing those guys get that chance to leave Fridays and go to Saturdays. I just don't know that teams like Georgia should be expected to foot the bill for all of it. But, obviously, that's a complicated deal. Let me pop over to Facebook. Jimmy Barnes says the ESPN FPI data says that Georgia has a 79.1% chance to beat South Carolina. Yeah, believe it or not, I'm assuming this hasn't changed, but if you want to go back to early in the year, when ESPN initially produced its FPI data, that the East opponent with the best chance of beating Georgia was actually South Carolina. Excuse me. The East opponent with the best chance of beating Georgia was actually Missouri. That they were at like 22% to win compared to just 21% there for South Carolina. So according to the ESPN FPI data, the most likely East opponent to upset Georgia is actually on the road at Missouri, not South Carolina. Estevan Franklin asking you about the LSU, the DawgNation Invasion of Baton Rouge contest. Yeah, we should be able to check that out at DawgNation.com. That should be, I think, up and running there on the site. We're going to talk a lot about that on Before the Hedges here this week. JY says, B, I guess you mailed my shirt. I didn't see it on your desk. Well, y'all don't miss a thing. Y'all do not miss a thing. I give you credit for that. Andrew Leahy on the subject of Chris Hinton, who one of the things that makes Hinton a valuable 2020, or I should say 2019 prospect, one of the things that makes him valuable there is the fact that his brother is also an elite prospect on the other side of the ball along the offensive line, which is a really good point. Kyle Miles says Demetrius Robertson did get cleared to go this year, right? And that is true. Robertson will be a part of the Georgia offense on Saturday. Pat Odom says Kirby Smart, best coach since Vince Dooley, ready for kickoff. And Pat, I'm ready for it too. And that's the one cool thing about but what we have here on this program is that congregation of Georgia fans who all feel the same way. You know, we are all of the same mind here of let's hurry up and let it be Saturday. Let's get to Athens. And by the way, I know many of you are going to be a part of that tailgate there starting at 10 a.m. I've got the details on that. I'm looking forward to stopping by and being a part of that. We got a busy Saturday around DawgNation in terms of some of the broadcast obligations that we have. But I'm looking forward to being a part of that on Saturday morning on my way into the stadium. So just really appreciate those of you who are getting that together and being a part of that. I look forward to hanging out there for a bit and just really, really excited about the upcoming week. So a lot of stuff going on here on DawgNation. The Kirby Smart press conference later on. Chip and Michael have coverage of that. We got Before the Hedges on Wednesday at 3. Centel Intel every day at DawgNation.com. What else? Podcasts we have them posted for you. So if you missed a regular portion of our broadcast, you can check that out. Going to be a lot of fun. I can't wait for tomorrow as well. 10 a.m., another day closer to the start of the season. It's a DawgNation Daily presented by Marco's Pizza. Y'all have a great day. I look forward to seeing you then.